This all happened over roughly a 3-year period, 2010 to 2013. I was working overnight at a residential school for kids with autism and other things. I absolutely love paranormal stuff, but was always a skeptic. I would always say, I don't believe until I see it myself, and I held that mindset until I worked here. Now, I believe. Overnight staff bounced around everywhere. Only a couple of senior people had assigned units because they've shown they can hold down the fort. As a new guy, I was working everywhere and quickly collecting ghost stories. I would say I've personally experienced 2, maybe 3 entities in my time there on 2 different units. I've only ever experienced these things on these 2 units. I wouldn't call the other stories BS, but I can't confirm them. For privacy reasons, I'm going to try and be vague here and call them Unit H and Unit N. I'll start with Unit N because it's pretty run-of-the-mill. Unit H is the juicy one. So Unit M was just one very long hallway with 6 bedrooms on either end. At one end was a living room / kitchen thing, and where the night staff would set up. At the very end of the hall is a door leading to a stairwell, and these doors beep when opened for safety reasons. This was my first overnight gig, so after seeing a couple of things I just blamed it on exhaustion because working overnight sucks. I would constantly see out of the corner of my eye a kid-sized black shadow run from the last bedroom door to the stairwell door and out. The door never moves, never beeps. The crazy part is the consistency here. I would see this thing maybe 12 times a night on a good night. I finally brought it up with an older staff member and he says, "Oh yeah, that's the runner. He's harmless, don't worry." Apparently the regulars on Unit N would just kind of live with it. It only happened overnight, and some staff never saw it. I also had a few nights when around 3 a.m. the Tupperware in the kitchen cabinet would start rattling until I stood up. Then it would stop. It's pretty basic, possibly explainable, but that's not what we're here for. Now, Unit H was haunted as hell. Flat out, this unit made me believe and then some. For context, Unit H is basically a house. 2 floors and a creepy-ass basement that has a single remodeled playroom. The craziest part of this unit is we know who is doing all of this. A single day staff still worked there that was working at this place in the 90s, when a kid was tragically killed in a restraint in that basement. It's a known thing, but no one really talks about it, and I don't know how it could ever happen, because I became a restraint specialist, and it blows my mind that it happened at all. Improper technique and training, unfortunately, resulted in this child suffocating to death, and I still have the obituary in storage. I'm trying to be vague, but I'm sure some smart people have already figured out where this is, and let's just call the kid Johnny. Now, Johnny loves to mess with people, which in retrospect was pretty funny. I became permanently assigned to Unit H when I started hearing people talking about how haunted it was, and they didn't want to work there. Then, there's me that butts in saying, "Hey, if it's haunted, could I go?" And everyone was stunned, but it worked. I got to Unit H. This continued to work until I just became permanent. Now let's talk about the experience. One time, I was walking into the house and heard a slam upstairs. I went in and asked a day worker who was up there, and she said no one. It's the holidays, so we moved everyone downstairs, as during the holidays most kids go home. We consolidated so we don't need 2 staff. I immediately dropped my bag, knowing what this means, and bolt upstairs to find an empty dresser knocked over and an empty room. Weird, but I didn't see it happen, so it doesn't change anything. The long-time worker told me at the very beginning that if he ever starts creeping me out to just say, "Very funny, Johnny, that's enough," and he'll stop. I'm thinking, yeah, right, a ghost is going to listen to a command. These incidents happened mostly over Christmas time. Emotions are high for the kids that can't go home, and we assumed that went for Johnny too. The living room in this house is huge. One side has a Christmas tree all done up by the kids, and on the other end was a sort of wide window to the kitchen and a trash bin underneath it. I'm terrible at estimations, but it had to be at least 25 feet from the trash bin to the tree. This is relevant because in the middle of the night I hear a tink and then a small rattle from the living room. I go to check and see one of the ball ornaments slightly shaking and a chicken bone underneath it. Genuinely confused, I take the chicken bone to the trash and see the kids had fried chicken for dinner. Did Johnny just throw this at the tree? Again, I didn't see it, so can't believe it. Sitting at the end of the hallway another night, I'm talking with the long-time staff who stayed late for paperwork. It's probably 1 a.m. We're just talking about random irrelevant stuff, and during one of the natural pauses I heard my name from down the hall. This is extra weird because my name was pronounced correctly, and my name is usually mispronounced because it's spelled differently, and I just don't bother to correct people. So all the kids, all of them, call me the wrong name. I look over at the day staff and she just goes, "That was Johnny," all nonchalant, and returns to her paperwork. Okay, now I'm starting to think Johnny might be real, but I don't know. Another day sitting at the end of the hall alone, looking down the hall you have the stairwell and a bedroom to the right, and the living room and a safe room on the left. Safe rooms are just empty concrete rooms that kids can utilize for many reasons. So a kid was just walking in there as normal, and it's encouraged to go take space instead of freaking out. So when I saw a kid walk partially out of the wall/doorway with a blanket over himself, cross the hallway and go into the safe room, I didn't immediately think much of it. But you have to check on them, of course. I thought the wall thing was odd, but dismissed it, but it became relevant later. I walk down the hallway, get to the safe room, and flip the light on while saying, "Hey, what's up?" But the room is empty. So I go to the kid's room and flip the light on, waking up the kid in the room, and he proceeds to yell at me for waking him up. What did I just see? I relayed this experience to the long-time day staffer, and she told me the bottom floor was remodeled and the doorway for that room was moved, and where I saw Johnny walk out tracks for his time. This is starting to get wild, I tell myself. My last experience was the one that made me believe. It wasn't extreme or anything, but another overnight shift I decided to be nice and do the laundry on my break so the kids had towels and showers in the morning. That meant going down to the creepy basement at 3 a.m, but whatever. Loading the washing machine, I start hearing creaking and look behind me to see the door to the playroom where Johnny died, slowly closing. For some reason this creeped me out. I never got creeped out by any of this, but this one thing in particular. I used my get out of jail free card and said, "Haha, okay Johnny, that's enough." And the door immediately stopped. I put the laundry down and went upstairs, because having an interaction like that is what finally sold me. Spirits are real, don't ask me how it works, but it does. Several people have had interactive experiences with Johnny. He seems to choose staff he likes to mess with. It took him a while to mess with me because I was new to him, but after a while he started his shenanigans. Unit N could probably be explained away despite its consistency, but I firmly believe Unit H is housing the spirit of a boy who is perpetually 8 years old, because this happened in the 90s. These things continued to happen here and there. Unit N never changed, and Unit H toned down a little. I think Johnny got the hint, but he's still messing around with me a little and I don't mind. It was just the creepy basement at 3 a.m. that got to me. My family is from Bangladesh, but I was born in the US and moved around all over because my father was a diplomat. Every summer we would go back to Bangladesh to visit family. My maternal grandmother's family had a grand estate that has been in their family for generations in the village. The estate was magnificent and a sight to behold, but unfortunately from what I'm told now, due to sibling rivalry, the estate has been left to disrepair and lay vacant most of its days. The estate was built on one of the feudal lords of the area during the beginning of the British occupation, and the house was huge, with massive ceilings and stained glass windows. We looked forward to escaping the hustle of the city, and to go there every summer. This particular estate was one filled with stories from my grandmother's family members in the local village. I always chalked them up to local folklore, but then it happened to me. I'm 30 now, but when I was 12, we went to the estate as we usually did. It was very late and all the adults had gone to bed. The only ones who were awake were me and my 2 cousins. We were sitting by the house courtyard talking and catching up. There are thick woods and 2 large ponds beyond the courtyard, so there are always noises of critters, crickets, and other animal activity. Well, all of a sudden, everything stopped. It's as if someone pressed the mute button. It was very noticeable that it just became eerie quiet, and my cousins and I stopped talking. We didn't even have time to register when all of a sudden, I see my cousin who's sitting across from me frown her face in pure horror. She sucked in her breath and sat still, not even blinking. I asked her what was wrong, and she whispered that there was someone behind her. I could see very clearly there was no one behind her, and she moved her pupils from left to right. When my cousin, who was sitting next to me, sucked in her breath, looking horrified. She confirmed that something was behind her. Once again I saw nothing, and slowly felt someone behind me. You know when someone is standing next to you or behind you, the hairs on the back of your neck prickled up? Well, that's what happened, and I felt a little movement of wind as if someone heavy was slowly walking behind me. Then it stopped to my left. There was a faint smell of rotting flesh, mixed in with what smelt like floral essential oils. Then it happened. Something lightly touched my hair and grabbed a strand. At that moment, I grabbed both of my cousins, who also saw a strand of my hair floating up on its own for a moment, and ran to one of the bedrooms where one of my grandmother's brothers was sleeping. He was dead asleep, but we closed the door shut behind us and crawled under his bed. We didn't even want to breathe too loudly, but we watched as a shadow slowly dragged across the floor outside the door. Then it stood outside waiting. We confirmed later that it wasn't just me imagining, but all 3 of us saw 2 pairs of feet outside the door. But one foot was pointing towards the door while the other was pointing in the opposite direction. The feet looked like it belonged to a woman. It stood there for what felt like hours, but in reality was probably only a few minutes. Then we saw the figure move back from the door and heavy footsteps slowly walking away, out into the courtyard. Even after it was gone, none of us spoke a single word or climbed out from under the bed. When I finally volunteered and shook my great-uncle up, we told him why we were scared and asked for him to take us to the room we were sleeping in, which was on the other side of the estate. Shockingly enough, he didn't question us, just asked if we saw something. I nodded and he got up, opened his bedroom door to check the hallway, and escorted us back to the room we were staying at. We didn't sleep at all that night, not only from the experience we just had, but also from the cries of the property livestock. They all just began screaming in unison, something they weren't doing before. The noise was so loud it woke up others in our room, and everyone knew that whatever was happening didn't feel right. But after about 10 minutes, the animals calmed down. The next morning we discussed amongst ourselves what happened, and also talked over the random cries of the livestock for a brief moment. The estate caretaker said that the livestock sometimes get distressed if they see something, and there are many things that roam the house that they don't like seeing. We also told them what happened to us last night, expecting to be ridiculed, but to our surprise no one questioned it, especially because everyone at some point in their lives experienced something in this house. My mother strictly forbade us from staying up on our own at night, something I had no issue with, but I barely slept for the next 2 nights we were there. That was the second to last time I went back to that estate, and nothing unexpected happened the second time I was there, or not to my knowledge at least. Unfortunately, life and adulthood got in the way, and I don't go back to Bangladesh as frequently as I would like, but I'm planning to go this summer after 4 years, and we are planning to apparently go back to the estate after more than a decade of not going. This is one experience that will always haunt me, because I saw something and it touched me. But it is just one of the encounters that I have now had throughout my life. My friend always swore the house she grew up in was haunted. When she became an adult, her parents moved away and rented the place out to some of her roommates. One of them, Nick, not only backed up the claim the place was haunted, but that he had the power to see ghosts, an ability he inherited from his grandmother. Ever the skeptic, I said, "Alright, tell me about this ghost." He told me that the ghost was a female with shoulder-length brown hair wearing a pale yellow dress that looked like 1950s style. He guessed she was a young adult, early 20s maybe, but couldn't say for sure because she never spoke, nor did he ever see her face. She only ever appeared with her back to him. I was going to be crashing on their living room couch that night and jokingly said, "Well, so long as she's not going to ask me for one of my beers because I'm not sharing." And he rolled his eyes and said, "Don't worry, she never comes down here. She's only ever appearing in my room or at the top of the stairs." Time went by, and we actually ended up in his room while he looked for something. I suddenly got extremely cold and pulled my jacket on. I didn't think much of it. It was January, in an old house with finicky heating. Of course I'd get cold from time to time. That's when my eyes were suddenly drawn to a blank section of his wall. There was nothing on it to look at. I just felt my eyes inexplicably drawn there and couldn't look away. "She's here," he said quietly, still thinking he was just BSing me. I was staring at a blank section of wall after all. I didn't know why, but that was an easy thing for him to turn spooky for the act, right? Romy, the friend whose childhood home it was, called out to us while heading upstairs up the room. "What are you guys doing up there?" "Just introducing Allison to the ghost," Nick said. We all met her at the top of the stairs, where the conversation turned into idle chit-chat. And suddenly, I felt what I can only describe as someone lightly drawing their finger shoulder to shoulder across my back. But there was something almost staticky about it. But I wasn't scared, I was angry. See, Romy had another roommate, this guy Todd, who was a textbook creeper, and always had trouble keeping his hands to himself when girls were around, me especially. I crocked my arm to swing around ready to knock his block off, but sure enough, no one was there. Nick smiled. "Yeah, that was her too," he said. Do I believe in ghosts now? Yeah, I'm still skeptical about this whole thing. All I know is I'd rather have a ghost touching me than Todd. When I was 17, this happened. It's a scary experience that has changed my life forever. My mum and dad had recently gotten divorced, which destroyed me, but they decided to co-parent so that I would remain okay between both of them. My dad got me from Saturday to Monday, while my mum got me from Tuesday to Friday. After the divorce, my mum bought a new house off the market. The house was apparently built sometime in the 1800s, and when I say this house gave me the creeps, I would tremble just being inside it. I told my mum that there was something off about the house and how it scared me. She just remarked that I wasn't familiar with my surroundings and I would get used to them soon. I got the most creeps from the bathroom that was down the hallway from my room. It was freaky. Every time I entered, I felt something bad happen there. When I went to wash my hands after moving boxes into my room, I heard this strange noise as I was washing my hands. I looked to see where the source of the noise was, and I looked into the bathtub, and to my utter shock, there was this weird black substance rising from the drain. I got closer to look at it, and it just spewed from the drain. I yelled for my mum to come check it out, but by the time she came, the black substance was gone. My mum said I was probably just imagining things and left. I went to my room feeling that way for a second, but I knew what I saw, and knew that it wasn't in my head. Things continued to happen, such as footsteps stomping down the hallway at 3 a.m, shadows out of the corner of my eye, tapping on the wall, and much more. I woke up one night to see an old man standing at the foot of my bed, his eyes completely black, his face twisted with a disgusting grin. I covered my head with my pillow. It's safe to say I hardly got any sleep while I was there. When I was at my dad's, I didn't feel anything like this. It was peaceful and I felt safe in my room. I told my dad of these instances at my mum's house, and he said it wouldn't surprise him, as he had his own encounters with the paranormal, and everything would change when I went back with my mum. That Thursday was like any other day. I came home from school around 2:30 p.m. and my mum got home at 4. She cooked dinner and asked why I've looked so tired recently. I told her that she doesn't understand and that when I try to talk to her, she just shuts me down and doesn't believe me. We had dinner. She went and did chores around the house while I did my homework in the living room. By 7 p.m., she told me she was going to take a bath and go to bed. I said goodnight to her and went to my room. I heard her go into the bathroom. I turned on the TV with the light still on in my room and I immediately passed out. I woke up at around 1 in the morning with this tingling sensation in my stomach. I got up and saw the bathroom light was on. Odd, shouldn't Mum be sleeping? I said to myself. I quietly opened the door and went into the bathroom and saw the light was still on. I opened the bathroom door, and to my utter astonishment, the bathtub was still full of water. I wonder why my mum would leave it like that. I was going to head to her room when I froze midway there. Standing there, before me was my mum. She was completely naked and her hair was sopping wet, and she had an evil look in her eyes. "Mum, what are you doing? Put some clothes on," I said, but she didn't reply. I kept saying, "Mum." I blinked, and she was gone. I thought she was playing some kind of prank on me. I heard something behind me and I looked. She was now somehow behind me with her back to me. I yelled out to her, but she didn't reply. I ran to my room, got my phone and rushed out, and that's when I ran into her again. She had her back to me once more. She turned around to look at me and I was speechless. That's when she walked into the wall and vanished. I screamed and rushed out the house, running to a gas station 10 minutes up the road and called my dad to come and collect me. I didn't tell him the truth. He wouldn't have believed me. Heck, I didn't even know what I was seeing. I live with my dad full-time now. I don't know what that house or bathtub did to my mum, and I haven't been back since. Several things happened to me in one house in 2017, and since then I've seen people on TV telling their haunting stories, and a lot of people said the same thing that happened to me. So I moved into my ex's house with her in 2017, and from the start, I hated the house. It always seemed gloomy and dark to me, but I suppose some of that was the decor. Anyway, I'm usually up late, and it's normal for me to be up there pottering at 3 a.m. I noticed whenever I was alone in the living room, I was constantly seeing shadows in the corner of my vision, like enough to make me quickly turn and look. And this was a regular thing. I put it down to lack of sleep, but wondered why I hadn't experienced it before anywhere else, or since, I may add, and I've stayed up a few times straight before, and it's not happened. Often, we'd be in bed and I'd ask, "Can you hear that downstairs?" And Emma, my partner, could hear noises too and describe them perfectly. She said it sounded like movement. I'd go downstairs, check all the doors, and there'd be no one there. This happened frequently. I was always checking downstairs. And she has a dog and a cat flap, and he was a nervous wreck of a dog, and whenever the noises happened, you'd hear Pepe, the dog, go nuts and fly out the dog flap and sleep in the garden. But now I am mentioning it to Emma, and saying something's up with the house, and asked if she ever noticed anything, and she said no. So I'm thinking it's just me then. Anyway, she had called Ethan, who was primary school age, and I woke up one night to him crying and calling for me. But I was lazy and woke Emma. But she said that he was calling me so that I should go. I went to his room and found him fast asleep, snoring, and not faking it either, because his drink cup was on his chest all leaking over his PJs, so he was properly asleep. At dinner time one other day, Emma was calling Ethan, but he wouldn't answer, and she had a tiny cupboard room in her kitchen, very small, no windows, like a pantry thing, and the door opened inward. So she's calling him, and then I said, "I'll go get him." Then noticed the cupboard door was open a bit, so I'm saying, "Ah, Ethan, I found you," thinking he was hiding. I go to the door, and it's slammed shut on me. I'm still thinking Ethan must be in there, and when I go to open it, there's no one inside. By now, Emma thinks I'm nuts, because it's only me that's ever gone on saying something's in the house, so I'm wondering why just me, or seems aimed at just me. Turns out I found out later, Emma messed around with Ouija boards when she was younger. Anyway, we were always together. I was looking for a job back then and I was never alone in the house as in just me. But one day, Emma had to go to her mum's, so I dropped her off and came back. And I could hear the radio on inside from the driveway and wondered why we didn't hear it when we left. I go through the front door and the living room door is closed. The radio is banging on full volume in the living room with the doors closed. I turned and closed the front door, and the moment I shut it and was in the house alone, the music clicked off, and I heard the second half of the switch click as the music finished. So I opened the door and went to my mum's instead. I woke up one morning and was like, "Emma, what the hell is up with my back?" She looked and saw that I had 3 crosses on my back and scratches. Me and Emma broke up later that year, but got back together shortly in 2022, and in the first month, I'm up late again on my own and hearing whispers at 2 a.m. The window was wide open, so I went into the street and checked if the neighbors weren't out talking, and no one's there. I go back in, and the whispering sound now sounds like a conversation, and think, screw this, I'm going to bed. Emma's not had any trouble apparently since, and neither have I. But it really was a strange time while it was happening. My girlfriend got a job in Nashville, and we're relocating from Texas. So we went down for 5 days to house hunt, and stayed in an Airbnb that was overwhelmingly flooded with positive reviews. It was in East Nashville, and the area was a bit iffy. But that was on us for never having been to the area. Now I have stayed at multiple Airbnbs, and I have never felt off about a place. But when I walked into this Airbnb, despite it being very nice, I also felt weird in there. A feeling of untrustworthy. And I chalked it up to the area, and such a new environment. Later that night, we all got into bed very early at 8:40 p.m. There were 3 of us in the house, and here is the timeline of the events and what happened. I can't logically explain all of them, so I want to share them. On the first night after going to bed, the master bedroom door was completely closed, and as we were drifting off to sleep, it sounded like someone came up to the door and slammed on it with full force, as if hit with 2 hands. There was a hanging mirror behind it, and it was shaking away from the door. I got up immediately and yelled for the other person in the house if they're okay, and me and my girlfriend both heard a female whimper. So I grabbed my gun and ran and opened the door. But no one was in the hallway. Everyone was really shaken up from this, so I went to check the whole house and every door and closet and bathroom. It wasn't that big, and there was absolutely no one. We got in the car and drove into downtown for fresh air, and my dog, who had been with us on the town-hour drive and not barked once, was now barking extremely aggressively at the back window. On my second night, it was me, the only male, and 2 females at the house. And after night 1, everyone was too scared to sleep in their own room, so we slept in a bedroom that had 2 beds and felt safer, as well as propped the doors open so they wouldn't slam or get banged on, and left the lights on in the kitchen. After 2 hours of sleep, the bedroom light turned on by itself. It was 1 a.m, so I got up and tried to ignore it, and turn it off and got back in bed shortly. Shortly after, 2 very slow, heavy footsteps were heard walking down the hallway. The footsteps sounded deliberate and weighted similar to boots. This woke up everyone, including my dog, who actually jumped off the bed and ran towards the hallway, which once again prompted me to run out with him and check, but no one was in the house. When we moved into the living room with the TV on, and the light was turned off, we remained there for several hours. At 4 a.m, I went back to the room and tried to sleep more, and only about 10 minutes into the night did it turn itself on again. I turned it off, left the room, and after this point the light did not turn on again for the remainder of the stay. But then did a bunch of stuff for the next night to see if things would get moved, like leaving the dryer door open and propping doors open with chairs or bags. On our final day, when the group was together in the kitchen cooking, one guest was alone in the master bedroom bathroom and heard a woman's voice say, "Hello," seemingly coming from the bedroom area. She responded verbally, believing someone in the group had called out, and when she returned to the kitchen and asked who had spoken, everyone present confirmed that they had been together the entire time, and no one had said anything. I went to the room to go check, and of course there was no one, and the chair I used to prop the door open had been moved all the way back near the table where it came from, and everyone claimed they hadn't touched it. After this final incident, we gathered our belongings and left the house and spent the last 2 nights in a hotel, because despite the genuine fear this thing incited, there were also 2 very real threats of a physical person, and we couldn't continue to take that risk. That said, these events were also accompanied with feelings of malice and fear and oppression. Of course, that could have been our head messing with us, but also too many things happened in a 3-day span for it to be coincidence after coincidence, in my opinion. I want to start off by saying that my boyfriend doesn't really believe in anything paranormal, and this has been going on for at least a year. I don't know what the explanation is or what to do. So, first of all, I live in an older house built in the 1960s in western North Carolina. I live closer to the city, but I'm still technically Appalachia. I've been noticing very strange things since I moved in, but it doesn't seem to affect me as much as other people that visit my house. Friends get the shakes in the middle of the night, wake up at odd hours, and just feel like someone is watching them. I think it's important to say that my house is just a few doors down from the house that my mother grew up in and her grandfather died in. Lots of trauma took place in that house, which could have definitely manifested as dark energy. Another house down the street had a very violent murder take place. The family that moved into my mother's childhood home had instances where their son would seemingly talk to imaginary friends in the middle of the night. It's a whole bunch of weirdness. I'm comfortable with the theory that my great-grandfather's spirit haunts my house. It makes sense since it's only a few doors down from where he died. However, my boyfriend has been sighting what he describes as a large figure almost 10 feet tall, completely black with white eyes and no other features. He's seen this figure standing over my bed in my room, running across my yard, hiding under my car, specifically focused on my room, which is detached from the house. I've always felt scary energy in my home, but it's been getting worse. Every time I think or speak about his experience, I get chills, even in a hot room. How do I get a spirit out of my house? I'm a 44-year-old psychic medium, and I have known about my abilities from a very young age. Over the past 30 years, I've had some very interesting encounters, and figured it was time I'd share them with you all. My father was always receptive of my abilities, which include but are not limited to seeing and speaking with the dead. But my mother was a heavy skeptic regarding anything paranormal happening around her. Some things she simply couldn't deny. For example, I was about 4 years old when my family moved into a house in San Jose, California, and during one of their many arguments, a loose brick broke free from the fireplace, completely falling through our floor. My mum jumped back in fear because she said it felt like an ice-cold breeze had wrapped itself around her body, and she swore she heard 2 young girls crying. After that, she refused to go anywhere near the fireplace until my dad covered it entirely with wood. My father and I were used to things like this happening, though. It was at this same house in San Jose, where I met a very nice, albeit deceased, family inhabiting the property. The father was a kind person and the mother seemed to enjoy cleaning. They had a few children and I would play with them by letting them watch me interact with my toys. Sadly, I could see the injuries on them, presumably the cause of their death. But other than that, they just looked like ordinary people, only translucent, although I have seen many spirits take various forms for many reasons. The father once told me that the bodies of most of them were buried under the house, but he was in a box buried on the side of the house under a strange, lumpy mass of concrete. Since I was a curious kid, I tried to dig around in that area at one time, and eventually did find a corner of a wooden box, but the rest was inaccessible due to the concrete. However, they weren't all friendly spirits. I remember shortly after the incident where the brick fell through the floor, an apparition of a woman dressed in black and white clothing began to frequently appear in our kitchen. She would be weeping, and then would walk across the room and disappear into the wall leading into the garage. This would happen so often that my father eventually hung a sheet over the entryway into the kitchen so we wouldn't have to see it at all. Then, there was the backyard. I always got a real bad feeling about that place. I had a very nice swing set and jungle gym and a large, oddly patterned concrete area where I could play on my roller skates. I just couldn't bring myself to play there unless I was forced to, and even then, I had to have someone there with me. The house behind us had several spirits that would come to the back fence and try to talk to me. I never got a good feeling from them. Sometimes the winds would pick up, and I would get freezing cold, and the only sounds we would hear were the tree branches creaking and scraping. Even the large dogs next door would fall silent during these times. Throughout my childhood, we would have so many on and off encounters. It was like we had a little ghost child in the house. My sister described her as wearing a blue dress with long brown hair. I was about 7. I never had any encounters with her, but I have had my own personal experiences with stuff in my mum's house. We'll start with a short story. When I was about 7, I went downstairs to make some ramen at around 12 at night. Normally, when I go back up the stairs, I wake them up with my phone flashlight, since the big light would wake my parents. My hands were full, so I had to walk back up them with no light. My house had 2 sets of stairs, so when I made it to the middle part to go up to the second step, I heard these loud stomps, and they started to get louder and faster, as if something was running up them. So I ran as fast as I could up the second half and flicked on the light switch. When I turned to look, nothing was down there, and I was pretty creeped out. I thought about what my grandma had told me last time I got spooked. She said, "Don't let it know you're scared, tell it to go away." So that is exactly what I did. I told it to go away and went on with my night, trying to forget about it. Later that night, I rolled over to go to bed facing the wall, and as I was lying in bed, I could hear the floor creaking and what sounded like footsteps around my room. I worked up the courage to roll over and look, and there was nothing in my room. So this time I closed my eyes facing my room, and again the footsteps and creaking returned. At this point I'm scared, so I opened my eyes, and nothing again. I walked to my mum's room, wake her, and ask her to burn sweet grass and tell it to leave. I followed her around the house as she went into each room telling it to go away. When you burn sweet grass, you have to leave a window open so it has a place to exit. We left the kitchen window open, and the rest of the night I slept without any more problems. In the morning, my mum said Rocky, our dog, had gotten out sometime last night, and that the back gate was wide open, and the camera facing the backyard died at 2, when she had just put new batteries in the night before. And here's the spooky thing. The time we burned the sweet grass was at 1:50, and the kitchen window faced the backyard where Rocky, the camera, and the gate were all at. I'm not sure what to think of this, but I'm pretty convinced there's something here in my domicile. I purchased my bungalow in Port St. Lucie, Florida approximately 4 years ago, and was drawn to its modest charm as a single-story 1970s building featuring 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms across 1,300 square feet. The space had undergone a complete renovation just months before I took ownership. As the 4th owner of this property, which had served as a rental home for some time prior to my purchase, I settled into solitary living while my fiancé worked overseas. I could neither explain or ignore the disturbances that began subtly, but have since escalated into experiences that left me questioning whether my home harbored a haunting or poltergeist, or if it was just a trick of an overactive imagination. The first anomaly appeared innocently enough, 3 weeks after I had unpacked the last box, manifesting within the simple ritual of preparing for sleep each night, in which I would carefully close my bedroom door. On certain mornings thereafter, I would awaken to discover the door locked. It was caught enough in the latch mechanism to prevent me from turning the knob and stepping out into the hallway, trapping me momentarily in my room. These occurrences, which happened far less frequently now than in those early months, always carried an unsettling implication that something had happened that I could not see or explain in the night when I was most vulnerable. I wondered if there was some kind of fault with the door, but no rational explanation could dispel what was going on. Several months later, around 6 months of being there, another pattern emerged involving the door, leading from my main house into the garage, a space I used multiple times a day to access the washer and dryer tucked inside. A door I never bothered to deadbolt or lock, since the garage itself remains fortified against intruders by its own tightly sealed overhead doors. On many occasions when stepping through into the outside world, the door would suddenly slam against the frame with startling force immediately behind me, the impact resounding. I would find the deadbolt fully extended outwards, as if flung into position by an unseen hand, banging repeatedly against the metal frame, with no apparent wind or way to explain the momentum. This phenomenon was sporadic yet persistent, and always left me feeling very uncomfortable. Roughly 2 years into my time there, the disturbances ascended into the realm of auditory haunting when I began to hear footsteps in the low-pitched attic space directly above my ceiling, a cramped crawl area barely 3.5 feet in height, densely crisscrossed by sturdy trusses that leave no room for storage or human passage, rendering any physical presence there utterly impossible. These episodes occurred infrequently, perhaps 3 or 4 times each year, always unfolding as a rhythmic catch-thump, the full length of the house from one end to the other. Lying in bed during these moments, I would hold my breath and strain to discern the pattern, my heart quickening with each thud. It would always leave me wondering what manner of entity could navigate such confined darkness. In the more recent weeks, spanning the last 3 or 4, an even more intrusive presence has taken root outside my window, particularly those in the open-concept living room and kitchen area adjacent to the garage. Approximately twice a week, a distinct human-shaped shadow will glide across that iced surface, suggesting a figure of average height moving at varying distances from the glass, sometimes close as if peering in, other times further back like a passerby. On one solitary occasion, a distant jogger accounted for the shape, but the overwhelming pattern defies coincidence, for the street empties unnaturally in those instances. The Christmas season 2 years past introduced one of the most meticulously orchestrated displays, when I decided for the first time to adorn my home with a modest touch of holiday cheer by purchasing 10 inexpensive plug-in LED candles from Target. They were simple, battery-operated units without timers or remotes that I positioned along the sills of my windows, taking no more than about a minute to connect them, all around 5 p.m. To my astonishment and growing unease, every single night thereafter witnessed those candles activating themselves like clockwork at precisely 7 p.m., one by one in sequence, until all were fully lit by 7:01. Dawn brought the mirror image reverse, as the lights extinguished themselves at exactly 6 a.m. It was a bit hard to explain how, so I disassembled each unit frantically to reveal nothing but basic components: a bulb, spring mechanism, and battery connectors and power cord. There were no hidden timers or sensors or external controls to explain this behavior, and last Christmas I chose to leave those in storage. Throughout the years, the sensation of the bed itself coming alive beneath me during the deepest hours of sleep happened frequently, sometimes 4 times in a single week, other times absent for 2 full months, initiating almost immediately upon moving in. My bed will shake when I'm laying in it. It'll shake from side to side, not much, just half an inch or so, but it's immediately noticeable. It feels like a kid shaking the mattress or a parent to wake one up, just being able to move a little bit. It lasts for anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 to 4 minutes, and generally speaking when I play my rain machine. The next thing happened only 3 times, all of them in 2025. I sleep on my side because I have a back injury from the past. The right side doesn't matter, but usually on my right side. I've always felt the weight on my mattress because I can feel it pushing down, causing space under my legs. Kind of like a 20-pound medium-sized medicine ball is being placed there. In the last few minutes, and then my legs go cold. This last thing only happened 1 time, but in conjunction with both of these events. In December of 2025 at 9 PM, I was using my rain machine. Then a few minutes later, I felt the bed start to shake. Then I felt the weight give way under my legs and they got cold. Then came this growl. If I'd have sneezed, I'd have missed it. It was only for about 2 seconds, like a dog growling deep and throaty. I turned on my light, walked out, and slept on the couch. I'm really not sure what to make of it. Could it be my imagination, or a poltergeist living there with me as well? I'm a 17-year-old from Sweden that lives in a house from the 17th century. It belonged to a famous privateer, Lars Ganthenhelm. So I've lived there for 15 years, and when I was around 7, I started seeing stuff. So in my room I had a bookshelf that books randomly got thrown out of onto the floor. I had a tile stove in my room that I could hear scraping from, and I could sometimes hear people in there when I was home alone. And it was like this for many years. But now, it's not only me that can see things. My brother and my mother hear and see them as well. One time when we had Grandma over and everything was normal, we talked and laughed until my brother from nowhere just got quiet and says, "Kiki is dead." Kiki is my grandma's best friend, and we all look at him. My parents got angry with him for saying that. Then Grandma's phone rang, and it was Kiki's husband, saying that Kiki had just died. It was so weird, because it was not physically possible for him to know that. When I got a bit older, I think around 14, I started to doubt myself because I didn't hear so much. But sometimes I saw the chandelier swing a bit, or footsteps around the house. But I wanted to think more realistically, so I just brushed it off and didn't think much of it, until I got together with my girlfriend. The energy changed, and it was really effective on pretty much everyone, except my father, because he didn't believe anything we said, even if things happened right in front of him. When my girlfriend was in the room for the first time, she said she felt weird and sick. But she said she didn't feel sick before she went into my room. She said that she felt like she shouldn't be there and felt observed by someone, but there wasn't any other person there except for me. After a while, she wanted us to go somewhere else, but I didn't want to, so we stayed there. Not long after, she ran to the window and began to puke like crazy. We thought that maybe she was nervous because it was her first time here, but no. She puked every time she was in that room, and she never felt bad in other parts of the house but only my room. So I talked with my brother if it was okay that we swapped rooms, and he agreed. And my mother asked me why I wanted to change rooms. I told her that my girlfriend had experienced this, and asked her if there was something else that had happened here which I hadn't known about. When my mother moved in with my father, she also felt there was a weird energy in the house, and she said that in the bathroom, when she saw the towel sticking out in the air like something holding it in the corner and stretching it out. My mother asked my dad if that ever happened to him, but of course, he didn't even believe it happened at all. She said that when I was little, about 4 or 5, I said to her that I had a nightmare of a headless person with an axe in the bathroom killing me, and that really scared her. Like, what do you mean, a man killing you? I had no memory of it after I said that, but then I began dreaming about it for a week straight. After we swapped rooms, my girlfriend hasn't felt like that, and there hasn't been much activity in the room. But back when it was my brother's room, me and my mum were colouring in, and that's when we saw a lid from a mug thrown down the shelf and land between my mum and I. It was so weird, because the lid had safety clips so it just couldn't come off by itself. But that's the only thing I can remember happening in that room. I've lived in that room now for about 2 years, and the only thing that is bad is how I feel observed in there, and I really felt it when I said hello on my window. And the scary part is that it's on the outside of the window and you can't really reach up to it because of the high bushes. I don't know what to make of it. Does anyone have any explanation? I recently relocated to a new apartment across the street from the cemetery. I like how quiet the neighborhood is, and how close it is to my job. You can't be leaving work 10 minutes before you have to be there. I've noticed that my closet door has been left open frequently since I moved in. I first assumed it was because I was in a hurry to close it, or because my boyfriend's animals were bored. So I asked my partner to point it out to me and close the door and keep the cats out the bedroom. Since we established that rule, it continues to open. We woke up with one side of the door wide open, even though I said out loud that I have closed it before we went to bed. I thought to myself it could just be the old hinges. So my makeup table, which is right next to my closet, has a floor lamp that occasionally turns on by itself. No matter how many times I turn it off, it just turns back on after a few minutes. This happened for a few days and became an inside joke every time I had to pay my electric bill. I unplugged the lamp, thinking there might be something wrong with the wires. It must be an old house or something, and I do not want any further problems. I saw white stuff on my pillow last week after I got home from work. My boyfriend's side appeared to be untouched. I don't think I have dandruff, or spilled salt or something. All I can think is maybe the neighbors were moving something really heavy, and the wall paint landed right on my pillow. We don't let cats in the bedroom, so there can't be any cat litter. I don't know how it happened, because I was at work, but it started to get on my nerves that everything that happened in this house ended up on my stuff. I thought it was weird and washed the entire bed set. Since moving in, I have been having terrible nightmares about the pain or death of my loved ones, and I am not sleeping well like I used to before I moved in. Maybe it's stress from work, or maybe it's missing my family. I live overseas and recently lost my grandfather. I couldn't attend his funeral and couldn't shake the guilt. I'm trying to figure out if my nightmares are about the fear of losing another loved one and not being able to say goodbye again, or if I'm dealing with a deep level of stress from work. I tell myself that must be it. But today I've lost it, and all my explanations don't seem to fit anymore. I was looking out my bedroom window and saw a very sick bird barely hanging onto my windowsill. I was really sorry for that poor thing, and thought it might have overheated from the hot weather, and this sizzling aluminium sill. When I went to check on it, I couldn't do anything about it. The poor thing died right there on the sill, the one next to my makeup table and my always open closet. I'm getting suspicious and worried because I can't find an explanation for this anymore. It frustrates and spooks me out. Why is this happening to me and my belongings? Has anyone else had an experience like this? Is something wrong? Or could I be overreacting? My grandmother died while I was on holiday. She was found by my aunt and the nurse. I went with my stepfather to go clean out the house and grab a few things. Bear in mind, my stepfather is a very left-wing average Joe who doesn't believe in much other than paying taxes and doing good. We managed to fit one of the beds from the guest bedroom into the car, and I went back into the house by myself. It was eerie and silent, a very cold and empty shell since her presence was no longer here. I returned back to my house and put the stuff from her house away. I heard another car pull up to the house, and it's my stepfather who rushed inside, holding his wrist, and went up to his room, which I thought was odd. My mother later told me that he said he was pushed down the stairs by something in the house. Luckily, the stairs weren't too long, as her house was a bungalow with a small upper floor, but nonetheless he was scared to go back in the house because of this fact. Bear in mind me saying he is someone who does not believe in ghosts at all, and he and his mother got along very well. So, we to this day don't know what kind of malicious thing would have pushed him down the stairs, as it was a nice calm house with very little conflict or haunting. Does anyone have any ideas what it might have been? Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's Haunted House Scary Stories. I will be back tomorrow with funeral home stories, which should be good. I would like to give a special thank you, as always, to my members and patrons whose names you can see on screen. And if you would like to join their ranks and get some cool perks for doing so, follow the links in the description to find out more. Oh, and there should also be some exclusive cryptid stories for those of you who are, so, don't forget. But that's it from me though, guys. See you tomorrow, and good night.